Hello, and welcome to another week. Remember, the work week is a fiction. Monday, doubly so. You can get rid of them if you really want to. This is Social Justice Alchemy. Now, before I start hooting and hollering, I'll go ahead and let you know I am feeling much better this week. Whatever's going on hasn't, been cured or anything. Still don't know what the fuck was what. But I am feeling better. So I can take deep breaths without hurting, and thus I can, scream, scrant, hoot, and holler. So let's go ahead and get right on to doing exactly that. I was a little kid in the 80s. I was a teenager in the 90s. So I was formed, I was shaped by the Reagan, Bush, and Clinton years. A white middle-class kid when being white and middle-class was kind of awesome still. Growing up, I remember hearing a lot, the unions used to be good. They used to be necessary. But then they got a little too powerful. They overstepped their bounds, sort of thing. And they just sort of got corrupt and lazy. That the unions really aren't any good anymore. They used to be good, once upon a time. They used to be necessary. But now we have all the protections we need, so we don't really need the unions anymore. And it seems like in the incredibly conservative, neoliberal era of, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, that those ideas were taken for granted, that the unions aren't necessary, that the unions aren't good. Not anymore. They used to be, but not anymore. What a load of horse shit. I mean, it's not like rich people suddenly stopped being rich. It's not like the owners of factories and such suddenly discovered within them this incredible magnanimity that they're absolutely willing, happy even, to give their employees lots and lots of pay, lots and lots of breaks, plenty of vacation. It's not like they suddenly care overwhelmingly about the health and well-being of poor people. No, that's a load of horse shit. It's gotten worse for people over the years as unions have gotten weaker. I mean, just take a look at Walmart. Walmart doesn't have unions. They've been very, very effective at not allowing unions to come anywhere near their stores. They've broken the law, I'm pretty sure, when it comes to keeping out unions. And Walmart employees are absolutely fucked in many, many ways. Being a Walmart employee often means having to be on food stamps, in addition to working almost a full-time job. Not quite a full-time job, because as soon as you have a full-time job, you have to get some sorts of benefits, and those are expensive, and Walmart doesn't want to give you those, so you work 39 hours a week at Walmart. Then you work 30 hours a week somewhere else, and you go on welfare. Unions are never going to not be necessary. The wealthy are never going to stop fighting for their own privileges. They're not going to stop making sure that they get the absolute best deal they can. I'm not saying that they're incredibly evil. I'm just saying that they're ignorant and selfish in the way that all people are. Of course, they're going to look out for themselves first and foremost. They're going to make sure that their children are okay. But they have the ability to amass these huge fortunes, to centralize this incredible amount of power among themselves. And they're going to make sure that their own children get that benefit and not anyone else's. And why wouldn't they? That's exactly what you would expect people to do. The only advantage that poor people have is numbers. And even then, if they're not working together, if they don't have some sort of direction, then that advantage is completely wasted. The smaller numbers of the wealthy, of the powerful, is an advantage because it means that it's much, much easier for them to share information and act in a coordinated fashion. That's why it's vital to have things like unions. Unions make it possible to share information, to make sure everyone is on the same page and acting in a coordinated fashion, moving in the same direction, fighting for the same goals. Are unions the only way to accomplish that goal? Probably not, but it's going to be something very much like unions. Can unions be perverted and corrupted by something like the mafia? Yeah, but that's possible no matter what, and all that is private, wealthy, corrupt bastards taking something that could be a force for good and using it in the wrong way. It doesn't mean that the force for good is necessarily evil. And as for unions already won the fights and therefore we don't need them anymore, well, that's a load of crap, too. We know that you can't rest on your laurels, ever. You always have to keep fighting, if only to maintain the wins you've already gotten. Okay, the Trump administration has been busy rolling back protection after protection after protection, and the god-awful Supreme Court put in place by the Thuglicans over the years has been doing the same. Soon enough, we're going to be in an even worse version of America pre-labor movement. Worse just because the people in power will have even greater access to information than they did back then. They'll be better able to spy on labor movements and propagandize against them. We still need unions. We need a labor movement now at least as much as ever, if not more. So, fuck that neoliberal corporatist propaganda bullshit. Fight for the unions. Join a union. If there isn't a union for you to join, start one. And let's move on. Now, before we start on the news, something I just sort of caught my eye as I was, trawling through the darker edges of the internet this week. The University of South Carolina, within the College of Arts and Sciences, has, of all things, an Institute for Southern Studies. That, obviously caught my eye. You can see perhaps why. No joke. The county library down in Charleston, South Carolina, at least once upon a time, the shelf within the history section of the library there had a label on it for the Civil War. It was called the War of Northern Aggression. Maybe the librarian thought that was a fine joke, but what the fuck? Come on, we're talking about a war over slavery. This is the South is fucking ridiculous in a lot of ways. So when I saw that there was an Institute for Southern Studies and that the University of South Carolina was looking for a professor for this institute, I was, what the hell? I had to look into it. Here's the description they have for it. Welcome. Created to foster the study of the American South, the Institute for Southern Studies serves as a link to the very rich research resources at the University of South Carolina, as well as providing access to other important research facilities throughout the state. It brings together outstanding faculty specializing in the study of the South from a wide variety of disciplines for research, teaching, special seminars, and public programs. The Institute provides students with a variety of valuable, challenging courses and research projects, and the opportunity to earn a minor in Southern Studies. Its public programs on campus, throughout the state, and through public media extend its educational mission across the region and the nation. Through its scholarly publications, the Institute fosters the continuing exploration of all aspects of this important region. Well, that doesn't tell you very much, does it? But then, you look down just a little bit further on the same page. Events and announcements. 2018 David Ellison Fellowship. That doesn't say anything. But the very next one. Queer Activism in the Palmetto State. A panel discussion. Presenting Southern perspectives on the queer movement. Now that really caught my eye. If this was a really conservative institute dedicated to continuing the lost cause, still fighting the Civil War and all that shit, you wouldn't expect them to be naked enough in their bigotry to use queer in a negative way. So, I dug a little deeper, looked at the Southern Studies courses. And you have, for example, Intro to Southern Studies, 1580 to 1900. This course explores the history and culture of the American South from the colonial period to the advent of the Jim Crow racial hierarchy. Using studies that focus on the American South produced by scholars representing a variety of academic disciplines, this course seeks to unpack the fundamental phenomena that shaped the region and facilitated its, quote, uniqueness. In particular, this course raises questions about the intellectual, cultural, social, political, and economic forces that distinguish the region from other parts of the nation. Okay, I mean, it mentions Jim Crow right there. That's unusual if you're expecting some sort of conservative hot take on this. And then you have another class, Intro to Southern Studies, the 20th Century. 20th Century South possesses a unique culture and complex history that has formed the foundation of the idea of Southern distinctiveness today. The purpose of this course is to investigate topics from Reconstruction to the Civil Rights Movement through lecture, visual media, and guided readings. Each interdisciplinary lecture will explore historical, literary, and popular culture representations of the region. Course themes will include past and present perspectives on topics such as industrialism, race, class, music, sports, and religion, among others. Now, I'm not suggesting that this is a far left-wing Marxist institute, but at the very least, it's not quite the reactionary right-wing bullshit that was my first impression. And it looks like this is an honest, intellectual undertaking. So I thought that was interesting, if nothing else. Here in the heart. I mean, the South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union. It is solid red, always has been. So, it's nice to see that there in the center of South Carolina, and the state's capital no less, is an institute dedicated to an honest appraisal of what it means to be Southern. Let's move on to the news. Our first news story this week is a follow-up on something I mentioned last week. From socialistalternative.org, prison strike against modern-day slavery, racist mass incarceration, is largest in U.S. history. It's a fairly long piece, but well worth a read. It covers the history of prison labor, prison slavery, I should say, as well as talking about this strike occurring in at least 10 states, hopefully up to 17. Which was triggered in response to just inhuman brutality at a maximum security prison here in South Carolina, where violence broke out, and the guards responded by barricading the place where it was happening and refusing to let prisoners leave, such that a lot of people were imprisoned or killed. Whether they're in state prison or in federal prison, prisoners face the prospect, the certainty of forced labor for pennies or for nothing at all, for massive profits for the states or the private organizations they contract to, such as Unicor, the Federal Prison Industries Incorporated. This is absolutely monstrous. It's inhumane. If they refuse to work, prisoners face not just the normal degradation and inhuman conditions, the massive control and coercion of our prison system, but in fact torture that should be illegal, that sometimes actually already is. But because of the inhuman controls that they're placed under, prisoners have very little ability to communicate, either with the outside or even with one another. In fact, one of the things that makes this strike possible is widespread use of illegal cell phones that have been smuggled into the prisons. What's amazing is that this strike is already ongoing in 10 states, and hopefully it will spread to more. We really need serious, not even reform. Our prison system is monstrous. The way we imprison people, the way we treat people both in and outside of prison in order to get them there and then keep them there is awful. We are a piece of shit fascist nation. That's why we have the largest number of people per capita in prison in the world. It's because we use our prison system as a profit-driven, race-driven means of extracting value from people. It is no accident that the U.S. prison population exploded after civil rights. It was because the KKK, the fascists, were looking for a new way to control black bodies and make sure that they could get the maximum value out of them. A new way to enslave people. That is what our prison system is for. That is, in a way, what it has always been for. I encourage you to find out whatever you can about this strike, and if you can, support them. Let's move on to our next story. Our next story comes to us through gritpost.com. Title, UN Scientific Paper Suggests Capitalism Has to Die in Order for the Planet to be Saved. Now, you might think that they were overstating the case a little bit there. I mean, it's a UN paper, and the UN isn't exactly a hotbed of far left-wing radical action. And I went ahead and looked at the paper. It's a collection of independent scientists drafted for the UN. And the title is Governance of Economic Transition, which doesn't exactly scream anything, really. But then you read the opening paragraphs. We live in an era of turmoil and profound change in the energetic and material underpinnings of economies. The era of cheap energy is coming to an end. Because economies are, for the first time in human history, shifting to energy sources that are less energy efficient, production of usable energy will require more, not less, effort on the part of societies to power both basic and non-basic human activities. Sink costs are also rising. Economies have used up the capacity of planetary ecosystems to handle the waste generated by energy and material use. Climate change is the most pronounced sink cost. I mean, that's just laying out the bare bones of the facts. I mean, what it's saying is that we have reached the absolute limits of what we can handle, of what the environment can handle, that we are about to end an era in industry, in finance, in just capitalism overall. Next paragraph. What will happen during the oncoming years and decades when we enter the era of energy transition, combined with emission cuts, and start to witness the more severe effects of climate change? That is the big question. What kind of economic understanding and governance models do we need, now that economies are undergoing dramatic rather than incremental change? While economists typically emphasize carbon pricing as a policy tool for tackling climate change, natural scientists and multidisciplinary environmental research groups argue for more profound political engagement and proactive governance of economic transition, something akin to a global Marshall Plan. This difference in perspective is in part due to relatively recent advancements in environmental research, which have revealed a faster-than-expected decline in natural ecosystems, and take into account the whole range of human-induced pressures, and not merely climate emissions. In other words, what they're suggesting in that paragraph is economists are recommending these slow changes, these gradual things, these tiny little incremental bullshits, whereas people who are actually studying the environment are like, no, bro. We are about to collapse. We need to do something big. We need to do it fast. We need to do it now. So the paper is presented in very sober tones, and I have been omitting the citations just to keep the flow going, but it is full of citations to things both recent and a little bit older. This is a fairly brief paper, all told. It's only 8 pages, but it is very strong in its language, in its recommendation, and it's saying that we are coming to a tipping point, a breaking point, in fact. The way we are doing things is going to destroy us. Unless we make some very, very big changes right away, we're doomed. So, maybe they don't say that capitalism has to die. That's why Gritpost had to change their title. It used to say, the headline was amended. It says, from UN Scientific Paper says capitalism has to die to UN Scientific Paper suggests capitalism has to die. The paper doesn't actually say we need a socialist revolution. It merely says that the current system will die. In the end, capitalism is not a good model for long-term anything. It's bad for people, it's bad for the environment, it's even bad for the economy. All it does is allocate resources in order to maximize profit. It doesn't give a damn about efficiency, it doesn't give a damn about morality, it doesn't give a damn about the future. All it cares about is right now. And that's why the system has to die. We need something wildly different, if we are not going to die along with it. So I recommend you go ahead and read the full paper. It's pretty stark. But meanwhile, let's move on to the next story. Now, I don't know a heck of a lot about Esquire. It doesn't strike me as a particularly socially active news site all around. I mean, looking at the headlines it has up at the top of the page I'm looking at, number 1, Summer 2018 is the summer of sleaze, and it looks like it has a bunch of musicians and actors up there. Can't really tell. Number 2, I never stopped admiring John McCain. Well, you already know how I feel about that guy. Number 3, the best movies to see this Labor Day. I recognize the faces, or at least 3 of the 4 faces they have there, but one of them is Mark Wahlberg. So, number 4, who thought this was a good idea? Have no idea what that's about. Oh, Beto O'Rourke joins the protest against Trump's zero-tolerance immigration policy. Okay. Number 5, Neil Young and Daryl Hannah got married. Oh, that's nice. Nice for them. But then the headline of this article is, "This is fascism, pure and simple." The Trump administration is now denying passports to American citizens. This sounds terrifyingly familiar. Yeah, this is fascism, and whoever's writing this piece is right on the money with that, and good on Esquire for publishing it. Basically, a bunch of Hispanic folks on the border down south are being denied passports. They're having their passports revoked just because they're Hispanic. And the Trump administration says, we don't think you're real Americans. We're going to revoke your IDs. We're going to threaten to deport you and shit like that. That is exactly the same sort of shit that happens under fascist governments when they start declaring some people are not people. They uncitizenize them. They revoke their citizenship. They remove all national protections from them. Perhaps, like not fascist Germany, they'll just deport them or attempt to send them off to other nations at first. Or perhaps, like fascist Germany, they'll eventually start setting up camps to hold them in while they decide on the final solution to this thorny problem. Either way, this is something we really, really need to be concerned about. This is something we need to be up in arms about. Perhaps metaphorically, perhaps not. But when you start revoking citizenship rights from, well, anyone, then you have gone over a line, and you need to be pulled back sharply. This is not something anyone should rejoice over. This is something we should all be angry about. I know Trump supporters are going to be very happy about this, because they're racist motherfuckers. This is not a time to be polite. This is not a time for compromise. The Trump administration needs to end. Vote in 2018. Be part of the blue wave. Yes, I know Democrats aren't leftists, but we need somebody willing to stand up to this vicious, vile, fascist nonsense. Let's move on. Yeah, let's move on. Both to the next story, and let's move on from the Trump administration. Now, I don't know if I've made it a bit too subtle, if I've been a bit too reserved in my criticism of him, but I should spell out clearly. I hold Senator Lindsey Graham in contempt. He's kind of a spineless, weak piece of shit. He's occasionally made grumpy noises about the Trump administration and its villainy, but then immediately backs the fuck down. Just the other day, he made another grumpy noise, and I'm mentioning it because I want to be able to stand up and say, "Told you so," when he backs the fuck down yet again. From CBS News, Lindsey Graham says Trump's stand on John McCain, quote, "pisses me off to no end." Lindsey Graham shared a close friendship with the late Senator John McCain for more than 20 years, because of course he did. Graham said he found President Trump's response to the Arizona Republican's death, quote, "disturbing, with Mr. Trump ignoring reporters' questions about his passing." Yeah, Trump's never been good with reporters. And in addition to the White House flag lapse. In other words, he refused to put the flag at half-mast for quite some time, and then only did so for a brief period of time. Graham also told CBS This Morning co-host John Dickerson that while he's open to working with the president and will do everything he can to help the commander-in-chief, Mr. Trump's past comments about the military hero bother him, quote, greatly. Quote, "It pisses me off to no end, and I let the president know it," Graham said. Yeah, I know you're open to working with the president. You have your tail firmly beneath your legs, you're on your back, showing your belly. You are never ever going to stand up to the president, Ram. You know how popular he is with the gormless half-wits in this state. I fully expect Lindsey Graham to back off on this the moment he's called on it, if he is. If not, then he's just going to let it slide and hope he never ever has to answer for his cowardice with respect to the Trump administration. I'm willing to work with this White House even though I'm upset about what they said about my friend. Fuck you, Graham. Anywho, let's move on. Okay, the more I read at The Hill, the less impressed I am with them. At thehill.com, title, Roe v. Wade Could Be Overturned. We Need to Open Our Eyes. By Dawn Huckelberg. Opinion contributor. Well, no fucking shit, Dawn. Roe v. Wade could be overturned. That's what the right has been fighting for the last 45 fucking years. Yes, it could be overturned, but we need to be concerned about Obergefell, too. We need to be concerned about fucking everything. They are the worst, and this court could overturn a 3-year-old decision if it wanted to, and frankly, a lot of the members of the court want to do exactly that. Why are people not talking about Obergefell? And really, at the end of August, you're posting this piece. People have been aware of this since Kennedy announced his retirement. Try to keep up, Dawn. If you're gonna post something about the Supreme Court at this date, you should at least post something new. Let's leave the Hill behind. Let's talk about something else. And here we have our happy news for the day from Science Daily. CRISPR halts Duchenne muscular dystrophy progression in dogs. Now, I don't know anything about Duchenne muscular dystrophy. I mean, I know that muscular dystrophy is just a loss of control over muscles, so I'm assuming Duchenne is just a version of that. And what they did was they halted its progression in dogs. You know, a large mammal, it's not the same thing as halting it in monkeys or apes, but, that's still pretty significant. So CRISPR is a gene editing technique, and muscular dystrophy is a genetic illness. So this is pretty cool. I always love to hear about using CRISPR to halt the progression of diseases. I doubt we'll ever cure all diseases, but it's always nice to hear about one more advance. They halted the progression. They also saw significant improvement in muscle fibers. So this kind of reverses. It wasn't a complete reversal. It was they managed to restore a certain protein by up to 92% of normal levels. So it's not a perfect reversal, but still pretty goddamn significant. And I always love to hear about medical advances. So let's go ahead and go out on a happy note with CRISPR. And that's another week in social justice alchemy. I've been your alchemist, John Brockman. Thank you for joining me on this little troll through the news, looking at it from a lefty perspective and, screaming into the void in order to feel better. If you like this, you can go ahead, like, share, and subscribe, and maybe give positive reviews on iTunes, follow me on YouTube, the Social Justice Alchemy channel, or you can follow my blog. If you want to leave a comment there instead of on YouTube, it's at surgoshan.blogspot.com. That's Surgoshan. For a much lighter sort of thing, you can follow the other podcast I participate in. That's Dungeons and Debacles, a D&D podcast hosted by my friend Kevin, where a group of us are trying to destroy the world. Once again, that's dungeonsanddebacles.podcast.com. And since I'm feeling a lot better than I did last week, what with the ability to breathe, my little book review of Peter Kropotkin's The Conquest of Bread is back on the table. I don't know if I'll be starting it right away in September like I was planning, but I'll definitely be doing that. So, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.